Hello everyone, again this is Frank DiMora, the author of the book The Last Chronicles of Planet Earth and the lead for the End Times Research Ministry. Today is October the 17th of 2016. September the 28th of 2016, I produced a video and you'll see the picture of that video. I'm going to play a very short clip of what I said in that video about ISIS and the apocalypse, that the Hadith, one of the writings from Muhammad, had written claiming that this battle in Dabiq would be the apocalypse for the Muslims. And of course the Bible, the apocalypse, means the unveiling of what Jesus showed us as written in the book of Revelation, showing us everything that was going to take place before they happened. Now Jesus, we know, is a true prophet. The writings of the Hadith, as you're going to be seeing here, that are obviously coming from Muhammad, you'll see that what was written actually failed. It didn't come to pass. The people that Muhammad wrote about, and the Hadith contains these writings, according to what we know, is Muhammad claimed that this battle would be the apocalypse. And it would be the Western nations that would be fighting in this battle there at Dabiq. That is not the case. That did not happen. It is a false prophecy. And also, if the apocalypse means the unveiling, we know for sure now, because Turkey has gone in this battle and there's been no unveiling of the Mahdi. And so what was written in the Hadith, put there by Muhammad, and these are supposed to be the most accurate writings, which I'm going to show you, the apocalypse really didn't happen. Now, anybody that is Muslim who would read the Hadith, read the words of Muhammad, has to conclude then that Muhammad is not a true prophet. And the reason why you could say that is because if he were, the things that he wrote contained in the Hadith would have come true in its entirety, and that is not what happened. Now let me play this small clip of what I said in this video. You can always go back to my YouTube channel and listen to the whole thing, and I would recommend that you do that so you get the full context of what I said. But I'm going to play a short clip from that video, and then I'll come back and connect the dots. In other words, reliable sayings of Muhammad the prophet, okay? Now, while the early collections of hadith often contained hadith that were of questionable origin, gradually collections of authenticated hadith called sahih, which literally means true, correct, were compiled. And such collections were made possible by the development of the science and hadith criticism, a science at the basis of which was a critical analysis of the chain of oral transmission of the hadith going all the way back to Muhammad. The two most highly respected collections of hadith are the authenticated collections of Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. Sahih literally means correct, true, valid, or sound. So in other words, from the hadith came a prophecy from Muhammad. And this particular prophecy that was in a collection of the most accurate. So in other words, what they're telling you here, and this is why I'm giving you this whole dissertation about the hadith, what they're saying here is that in this collection, which is true, in other words, the prophecy from Muhammad has to be fulfilled. Because if it isn't, he is not a true prophet. It's as simple as that. And so you would have a false prophet with a book that gives untrue information. The hadith, which points to the Quran. So all we have to do is sit back, watch and wait, and see if this current battle that they're referring to in this article actually comes to fruition, because I'm going to tell you right now, it's not going to happen. We know when it's going to happen. The real apocalypse, the real prophet, Jesus Christ, told us exactly when it is going to happen. That can't happen until there's a confirmation of a 7-year agreement, a covenant that will be made, as you see in Daniel 9, chapter 9, verse 27. Now please keep in mind, when you go over now to my original video, when I give you all the details about this specific prophecy at Dabiq, according to that prophecy that came out of the Hadith, the Western nations would be coming after Islam in this area at Dabiq. And of course that did not happen because the major forces that are advancing and took Dabiq are Turkey, they're Islam, and other nations from Islam, not the Western nations. And what we know is, because it is not exactly like Muhammad said, that prophecy is flawed, didn't come to pass. So the major opponent, unlike what the Hadith said, was Turkey, Islam fighting against Turkey. Not the United States, not Canada, not Great Britain. It was Islam, people from Islam fighting against ISIS, their own Islamic brothers. And keep in mind, they're fighting against the radical Islamic brothers. And according to the sources, let me read you what one news source had to say. Turkey continues to position its allies, opposition forces, as power brokers and fight against ISIS in order to counter Kurdish influence in northern Syria. Coalition-backed opposition forces seized the town of Dabiq from ISIS on October the 16th as part of the Turkish-led Operation Euphrates Shield. So today's the 17th. They took it over on the 16th. The apocalypse, the outcoming of the Mahdi never showed up. Believe me, if he did, every news agency throughout Islam would be reporting on such an event. That is not the case today because it didn't happen. It was a flawed, it failed prophecy. The recapture of Dabiq represents a symbolic loss for ISIS, as the town holds symbolic significance for the jihadist group as the site of the future apocalyptic battle against the West. And they even tell you right there, it is the apocalyptic battle, but it wasn't against the West, it was against Turkey. It goes on. For Turkey, the recapture further solidifies its hold over the Syrian-Turkish border in northern Aleppo. Turkish President Recep Erdogan and Turkish allied opposition factions have expressed their intent to next push south to seize the ISIS-held town of Al-Bab, likely to preempt the predominantly Kurdish U.S.-backed Syrian Democratic Forces SDF from establishing a continuous zone of control connecting Afrin and Kobani cantons in northern Aleppo province. So in my video on September the 28th of 2016, I told you what was going to happen. And obviously I told you what wasn't going to happen. And just like I said, just like I warned, it has come to pass. And the reason why is because if you hold to real truth that is found in the Bible from a true prophet, the Lord Jesus Christ, he's already told us what's going to happen. Now the only thing that we don't know for sure is exactly when it's going to start. But what we do know, unlike Jesus, what we do know from Muhammad when he said the apocalypse or the appearing was going to happen with this battle, that is failed, it is flawed, making him a false prophet. Now I know that there's going to be a lot of people from Islam who won't like to hear that. But you have to ask yourself this question. Why didn't it happen just the way the Hadith writings stated from Muhammad? And until you come to grips with that, you'll be walking in a faith that has been flawed. And what I would like to do is to invite you to come over to the Bible, come over to the living Word of God, the truth, and begin to read the words found in the Bible. And listen to the prophets, the true prophets, from the Bible about what's going to happen in the near future with the real apocalypse, the unveiling that Jesus gives to us in the book of Revelation. This is Frank DiMora with the End Times Research Ministry. God loves you no matter where you are, no matter who you are, no matter what faith that you are holding on to. If you see that it's flawed, Jesus wants to invite you to the true salvation through Him. So that we know, if it started today, it's 7 years away, the apocalypse. So there is no possible way that ISIS is telling any kind of truth with their prophet. Now, going back to this article, it says reports in recent days that Turkish artillery fire has hit the town in the northern countryside of Aleppo suggest that the battle may have begun. So we're talking about right now. I'm not talking about a week from now. They believe that it's begun already. Now, there's going to be a difference between what ISIS is saying to their apocalypse and what we read about in the Bible, because when Jesus Christ comes back, it's going to end on that same day. It's not going to be something that is going to be drawn out for years or months or weeks. Jesus Christ, when he returns at the Battle of Armageddon, is going to destroy all of the enemies on that very moment. On the very moment. There will be not another day that will pass that Christ is going to have to engage in battle to the enemies that will be trying to destroy Jesus when he comes back at the end of the 7 years. Unlike what we know from this apocalypse, this false apocalypse that comes from ISIS prophecy. Now take a look at what Amek says. It says, the Terror Network's own news agency claimed a man died in the strike last Friday. One man. When the apocalypse happens, there's literally going to be millions upon millions of people, not one man, that are wiped out by Jesus Christ in the apocalypse. So that's a huge difference. Now, according to this prophecy, according to the article that we just got through reading, it says this: according to their theory, nations gathering under 80 flags, get that, 80 flags, will confront the Muslim armies. Now, according to this prophecy, it says this: for many jihadists, the alliance of Western and other powers, so they're talking about the West and other powers against ISIS and bombing raids over Iraq and Syria, is seen as the fulfillment of that prophecy. So if they're talking about an apocalypse and a bombing, it should all end right now, because that's what the apocalypse is all about, the end of the world, destruction. Now here, what you have here is you have Muslims fighting against ISIS. It's not just the West, it's Muslims fighting with some of the nations from the West, but it's very limited. There is no way that there are 80 flags that are on the ground fighting or even bombing ISIS. Let me show you. What I'm showing you right now is news that came from CNN, November the 27th, 2015. War on ISIS, who's doing what? And there's a video that shows you the nations that are engaged against ISIS, and it is nowhere near 80. Now, if there's a prophet out there from Allah and Muhammad, and he says 80, does he mean 80 or does he mean 8? According to the Bible, if a man says anything that supposedly Jehovah God or God had spoken to him, every single word of that prophecy has to be fulfilled. So in the Bible, if it says 80 nations, you would have to expect and understand and know that unless you saw exactly 80 nations, that prophecy is a false prophecy. And I'm going to show you that there is no 80 flags right in this area now that are fighting against ISIS. But again, keep in mind, it's not just the West, United States, and other nations from the West fighting. It's Muslims, people of their own faith, fighting against Islam. And according to the Bible, we know that it's all faiths from a one world religion during that 7-year tribulation that will be fighting against Jesus at the apocalypse. It's not going to be one ISIS and everybody against ISIS. That's another major difference. But now if you want, you can go to CNN, just type in war on ISIS, who's doing what. You can watch the whole video. But what I did for you is I just streamed it right to the point where they tell you how many people are actually fighting and who's doing what. Watch this.
There are now 65 coalition partners, but not all of them are engaged in combat.
Did you hear that? Not all of them are engaged in combat. So even if you have that number 65, it's not 80, and a very few of those 65 are actually fighting on the ground in and against ISIS. Let's continue.
Only 9, including the United States, are actually involved in airstrikes against ISIS.
Okay, so there you have it. 9 nations. And you see who they are. Canada, the United States, France, Turkey, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Australia. 9. A far cry from 80. All right, so on your part, if you want, you can do a Google search or do a Bing or whatever you're on, and do a check to see how many nations are actually fighting against ISIS. And you will find out that there is no number anywhere out there that is saying 80 nations, 80 flags. And unless that happens within the next week, if they're fighting right now, you know that's definitely something that did not come from a true God. And if it's not coming from a true God, it's coming from God's enemy, Satan. All right, so here is another very important part of the ISIS prophecy, the prophecy that they're taking from Muhammad. Take a look at this. It says, according to the prophecy, 1/3 of the Islamic fighters will flee the town while another third will be killed. But the groups believe the remaining third will survive the battle and triumph against the Western forces. Now, the big difference here is when Jesus Christ comes, no one's alive. Everybody's dead. Nobody can run away and hide in any village. There's no possible way. But what they're saying is you're going to have 1/3 that will make it alive, that flee to another town, to fight another day. That is not the case with the apocalypse of the Bible. Nobody will be coming back to fight against Jesus Christ when that battle is over, the battle of Armageddon, the apocalypse at the end of the 7-year tribulation. Now, personally, I think that it's a ploy by ISIS to try to enlist other people to join their group. And I believe that by reading this next paragraph. Take a look at this. The extremists have lost vast swatches of territory in both Iraq and Syria, including strategic towns close to Dabiq, and have allowed weapons and fighters to be smuggled in from Turkey. So I believe that they took this opportune time, because they've been losing, to throw out this prophecy that would encourage people thinking, and of course it's not going to happen, but thinking that if they come into this battle, they're going to be part of a prophecy fulfillment that came out of the Quran or Muhammad or wherever it came from, and that they will be part of it, so come and join them. I think that is a good possibility why they said it. But in any case, it is going to be a false prophecy. And if anything, all this battle will turn out to be is another skirmish, another one of the many battles that have been fought since 2014. It will not end in one single day like Jesus Christ emphatically shows us in the Bible. Now, if you don't believe me, all I could say is this. Watch what happens in this town, in this battle between the Western forces, limited, not 80 flags, limited forces from the West, and a few of Islamic State's fighters coming against ISIS. And when you see that it doesn't happen, understand where you need to go, and that is to true prophecy, and get yourself ready. We don't know exactly how much time we have, but we know from all the rest of the events that have been taking place that we're rushing toward the last 7 years that Jesus Christ warned about. The finality that will lead to the return of Jesus Christ to earth. Now here we are a day later, September the 29th of 2016. News.com.au. It says, Dabiq, first shots fired at site of Islamic State's apocalyptic prophecy. So knowing now the difference between apocalypse and a revelation, apocalypse being revealing as related to the Bible, and apocalypse as it relates to Muslim prophecy in the Hadith, this final battle. So it says the first shots have been fired in Islamic State's prophesied final battle. And of course, as I said earlier in this presentation, the final battle from the Bible is the Battle of Armageddon. Goes on to say, but will U.S. and Turkish troops advancing on the town of Dabiq really trigger Armageddon? I can answer that right now. Absolutely not. This is not a true prophet. This is not a true prophecy that coming from Muhammad in that Hadith collection. The significant town is little more than a cluster of houses in a remote, flat Syrian field. There are no riches here, not even an important crossroad. But there is an old Islamic prophecy that places the town firmly at the beginning of the end of days. It is where the forces of Islam and Christianity are supposed to meet in decisive battle. Now, I want you to understand one thing. Who is fighting right now in Dabiq? You have Islamic forces fighting against Islamic forces. So even in this havoc, and what they're describing here, this Islamic news machine who is doing a lot of propaganda, they can't even get it right. Because the prophecy in the head, if you read it, it's supposed to be fighting against the Western people. And as you already saw in this presentation, 80 flags. But in this case, you have Islam fighting against Islam, along with some of these other nations from the West. So it is not jiving for their own prophecy. It goes on to say it's a prophecy Islamic State seized as its own, using to drive religious fervor among its jihadists. And that's what I alluded to, that they're coming up with this kind of prophecy now, trying to use this to their advantage to bring other Muslims into this battle. It's not going to work because it's not a true prophet, it's not a true prophecy. It goes on to say, it even named its propaganda magazine after the tale of the first battle of the apocalypse. Earlier this month, U.S. Special Forces and Turkish troops began to encircle the town, coming as close as a few kilometers. Now the first shots have been fired by Turkish artillery. And the Islamic State's propaganda mouthpiece, Islamic Agency, claims one man was killed inside the village itself. And of course, I already explained to you the difference between the Battle of Armageddon, where everybody dies, nobody lives, nobody is going to escape that. And it goes on, end of times. The prophecy of Dabiq has strong parallels with Christian tales. And of course, this is coming from this news perspective that it's a Christian tale, but it is more than a tale. It is truth. Because everything that Christ had warned about the birth pangs, we're already seeing those things. Those aren't tales. That's fact now. They are actually happening. Goes on, like Dabiq, the Armageddon of the Bible's New Testament book of Revelations. First of all, it's not the book of Revelations with an S. It's the book of Revelation. The unveiling. There's only one unveiling. It's not a continuous amount of unveilings. It's just one that Jesus gave to us. So it's the book of Revelation. And this news.com, they got that wrong also. So, book Revelation is centered on a town on a hill of Megiddo. As with Dabiq, this is supposed to be the start point of a dramatic and catastrophic conflict, one that eventually destroys the world. Now, what we know from the book of Revelation, when the tribulation period starts, there's a period of 7 years. And during that 7-year period, that's when the earth is going through these cataclysmic events. And at the end of that 7 years is the finality where Jesus Christ comes back, and of course the world, the earth at that time, is going to be devastated by all of the plagues, the vials, the bowls, God's judgments that are being poured out on an unrighteous world at that time. So, Megiddo, completely different from this battle that we see of Dabiq. Now, in this report, they give you the location, what it looks like, the fields surrounded Dabiq, looking towards the hills in the west. This is supposed to be the site of the start of the final clash between Islam and Christianity. And again, let me just say this. It isn't just Christianity fighting in the Dabiq War, because you have Turkey, who's Islamic. You have Syrian rebels also fighting. So you have Muslims fighting against the Muslims. And that just breaks apart this prophecy, because what it says, that's not what we're seeing. So all I could say now at this point is to keep your eyes on the news, watch what happens in Dabiq, and you'll understand, hopefully now, as I've given you the breakdown from the unveiling, what the apocalypse is, the unveiling of what's going to happen in those last 7 years, compared to this apocalyptic event, which they're showing us that it is a single battle here at Dabiq. And if you do watch the news, you'll understand, like so many millions of people around the world, what is truth. And it is not found in this hadith writing from this false prophet, but it will be found in the Bible, and you'll see it over and over again by the warnings of Jesus Christ, which in fact are being completed in our generation. If you have any questions, feel free to write down those questions in the comment section. I'll do my best to answer them. But the bottom line is this: there's only one true God, one and only one true God gives true prophecy. The others will be exposed sooner or later, and in this case, I believe it will be sooner. This is Frank DiMora with the End Times Research Ministry. Keep on the watch. God bless.